We need to focus on that as core durable skill that's going to be with us throughout our lifetimes.
We go with technology, we've still got us, and we need to communicate and we need to lead and inspire. The time is really limited, and there are certain core courses that absolutely have to be taught.
I think it's also so important for us to really retain those cultural roots, especially.
So at the end of the day, we are walking, talking musical instruments.
Welcome to another episode of Relearning Work, where we dive into the future of learning and work. In each episode, we bring you conversations with leaders from industry and education to challenge assumptions, propose ideas, and share learnings as we all navigate the world that is being reshaped by Agentic AI. Whether you're an educator, a student, or a business executive looking to stay ahead in this rapidly changing landscape, there is something here for you. I'm your host, David Yip. And today, I'm very excited to have on the show Steve Knight, journalist, communications professor, and Edtech Entrepreneur. For over 35 years, Steve has been perfecting the art of communications, from his career as a broadcast presenter and journalist on BBC TV and the Discovery Channel, to teaching business communications at INSEAD, coaching executives and board members to be effective communicators, and recently founding his Edtech Art of Comms to scale his impact to a global audience via an innovative app and online learning platform. As the world of work is being transformed by AI, communication skills are more important than ever. And who better to talk to us about this than Steve? Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you, David. It's great to be on the show, and thanks for doing it, most importantly.
Thank you. I must say, having a business communications professor from a preeminent business school as the show guest, I was a bit nervous by that because you're probably thinking, okay, these are all the improvements, and I'd love to hear that from you afterwards anyway. On the show, we talk a lot about skills, particularly in the age of AI, and technical skills versus soft skills and everything else. But before we even dive into it, I always start off to try to get into the right mindset to explore assumptions. And particularly in AI, we need to be in the right one to see the opportunity. With AI, you can look at it from both angles. You can look at it as something good or something not so good. And there are always opportunities on both sides. In order to see the opportunities, we have to get in the right mindset, and we have to know what are we assuming to be able to see those ones that may be in our blind spot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, with communication skills and that ability to gain connection and chemistry and therefore trust with other people, I think that has always been underestimated, and majority of people don't necessarily spend a lot of time thinking about it until it's too late, regardless of how far technology will continue to evolve, because of course it will. I hope and pray that we are still relevant, and that, the connection and chemistry and trust is something that will still be paramount, because that's always in the mix, the human connection, the trust, the signing on the dotted line. And, we can see, we've seen it historically in the world anyway, but we're getting lots of examples of it right now in terms of politics, leadership, where the communication is diabolical and tragic and upsetting. And so however we go with technology, we've still got us, and we need to communicate and we need to lead and inspire, regardless of how techie we are. And I think that's one of the challenges as well. I mean, if you talk to most techie people will say, hey, I'm a bit of a geek. I'm great with maths. I'm great with computers. I'm not actually great at talking to other people. I hate networking events. So my goal is always to get people out of their shell and to help them be better. And then sometimes you get people on the other end of the scale that they think they're good and they come along they think they get an easy ride for a couple of days or something. And then when they come on our course and then they get perhaps a rude awakening because they're not as good as they perhaps thought they were. So communication, human to human, I think is paramount. And there's going to be some threats to that. We were talking earlier on about deep fakes, etc. So that's the one to be mindful of.
You touch on a number of things there, but I do want to pick up on the trust aspect, particularly with AI and communications. So you mentioned, a lot of the skills that we have or we think we have. Communications is one of those, I think we assume everyone has it, or we will learn those skills in terms of our education system. Are we actually teaching it properly, or are we consciously teaching it, or do we expect the students to just pick it up?
Yeah, I think the sad fact of the matter is, and there are, institutions all around the world that are doing way more than just paying lip service to communication. Of course they are. I remember having a conversation with a fellow professor at Stanford to see if I could help out there. And he said to me, Steve, do you have any idea how many communication skills we do on the MBA program at Stanford? It's 16. It's probably more now, you know.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful and respectful about how you talk about this. But of course, there are plenty of places where if we look at the MBA program and you look at the European UK model, the Australian model, it's normally a year rather than 2 years in the US. And so there's limited time. And you know, I don't just want to talk about the MBA, of course, but that is a big part of my coaching and teaching experience. The time is really limited, and there are certain core courses that absolutely have to be taught. And comm skills doesn't necessarily have to be taught. So that's why it's generally an elective. Still regarded, I think, as a soft skill. Well, I don't say I know it's still regarded as a soft skill. And my hope is that one day it will evolve so much that it does become a hard skill. So absolutely there can be more.
You use the word soft skill and hard skill. I must confess, I actually quite dislike the term soft skill because it implies something that is not as important. You know, it's not as important as maths or some hard skill. You know, you mentioned about your colleague at Stanford, yet another really prestigious elite school. Yeah, I certainly was privileged to go through one of these MBA programs at a top school, and we had communication skills as one of the subjects, an elective one. But I think, why does it have to be only for people who are going through master's degrees or these sort of elite programs? It should be everyone.
Yeah.
We need to focus on that as a core durable skill that's going to be with us throughout our lifetimes, be so important to us. And in some ways, ironically, maybe more important to technical people because they got so much brilliance, so many ideas and solutions they're coming up with.
Yes.
But to have those things actually make an impact, be useful, they need to communicate it to someone else.
Exactly.
Right? Whether it's verbal communications or written communications.
Yes. That's exactly how I started working in the academic arena, because, you know, I was still working at the BBC and still working for Discovery Channel, but always doing lots of corporate events. So hosting conferences and events and grilling the C-suite on the stage in front of maybe 500 or 1,000 members of staff, journalistically making sure that the staff got their questions answered openly and honestly and pushing until you get the answer in a journalistic style, you know. And then those C-suite, once reality TV came on board, they said, oh, you know, and you haven't, instead of having a classically trained journalist interview an architect about building a house, you know, you get programs like Grand Design. So you get Kevin MacLeod, who's the architect, and Kevin is now the broadcaster. Jamie Oliver, the chef. You know, the Monty Don, the gardener. You know, so it goes on. So the expert became the broadcaster. So then the C-suite said to me, you know, Steve, it's great. You know, we're hiring guys like you from TV and radio, and we pay you quite well for doing it. But actually, then you guys come along and you take the limelight a bit. And really, we're the ones who need to be in the limelight because we're the leadership team. So can you coach us how to do it? And I was like, no, you know, why would I coach myself out of a job? So I did say no for about 2 years. And eventually I said yes, designed a program, still called Art of Communication, but of course it's evolved hugely over the years. Then the first 3 corporate courses that I ran to coach leaders in how to communicate better and how to run events, etc. They said to me, can you do us all a big favor? Because we're hiring MBAs and they're bright young people, average age 28, 29, 30 years old. They've got fantastic ideas. They're hugely bright, but they just haven't got the skills to get those ideas across the table. And that's where, you know, that was what they said to me back then, that the MBA wasn't helping people to communicate. So they said, please do us a favor and go and talk to the business schools that are running the MBA. And the funny thing was, when I very first started ringing up, and in the days when people would actually pick up the phone, I'd be speaking to a dean of an MBA program or a director of an MBA program. And I'd very quickly tell them what I just told you. And then they say, oh, Steve, you sound so passionate about your job. It sounds like you absolutely love it. I'm slightly jealous. But we think you've got the wrong department. This is the business school. The arts and drama department is up the road. And I'd say, no, they're probably already doing it. And you can get someone from there to do it. But I'm also really offering to come in and help with your business students. Oh, right. So back then, there was hardly anybody doing it on a vocational level. As in terms to an academic level. And the rest is history, and it just grew and grew and grew. So, you know, you mentioned INSEAD, but when I first started teaching in those academic institutions, I was at, I think, around 20 different business schools around the UK and Europe, and then I relocated to Australia, so I couldn't keep doing them all. So I chose one, and that was INSEAD. But we're using the Art of Comms app at London Business School at the moment, and we just started at UWA, and fingers crossed for a few more as we launch into it to take off with the app and how that helps people, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Yeah. It's excellent how you brought this pretty fundamental skill that people assume everyone has, but really brought it to life and put a spotlight on it, at least in the business school area. Over the years, though, how have you seen, I guess, these skills evolve and how people have taken them on, particularly as technology become more and more prevalent? It used to be everything was done face to face, in real life, in the office, in person.
Yes.
Over the years, particularly after COVID, now a lot of things are done remotely, or at least hybrid.
Yes.
How's communication changed and the new skills that you need to develop and try to engage someone through this lens?
Yeah. That's an interesting one, and I think COVID was really the game changer there for us. And when we did our first online version of Art of Comms, I managed to get back to Australia from France before it got too late, and we had 12 MBAs on a pilot online program. And my big mistake was thinking it would just, because I'm so used to doing, TV, radio, it's the same for me. I'm the same person, but I was expecting these people to be online for 2 days, and it just was crazy. Of course, it didn't work. And so we very quickly learned that we'd have to break it up, hour and a half, something like that. And then, team coaching, etc. So we really redesigned it purely to be online. Now we're back in the classroom, which I do prefer. However, in terms of my corporate client, I'm probably now doing 80% online and only 20, if maybe it's only about 15% actually face to face, because people are thinking, well, okay, then you've got to pay the trainer, the coach to come from wherever that may be, even if you're in London and you're going somewhere else in the UK, or here in Australia, got to get to Sydney, whatever. So you got those expenses, etc. So if you can do it well online, which we can do, it's a good thing. But I do believe there's something very special about being in the room with people and getting that real connection and chemistry. But to drill down onto that question, they said to me, the students said to me at the start, we would have come into the classroom with you, Steve, but we can't do that now, and so how the heck are we going to get our character across on this Art of Comms course where you're expecting us to show that through the little pin dot, in the laptop lid? And I said, it's a really interesting question, because my background is TV, because my background is radio. This is my comfort zone. I had to go out and buy a professional mic, but it's so easy now, it's so easy. I've got a big cockpit of a desk, don't have to have multiple cameras. And so I'm very used to, from my radio days, being taught and mentored, when you talk to this sponge on a stick, you're actually talking to someone on their own, in their car, driving to work or driving back from work, or you're talking to someone who's relaxing after a day's work, or they're on a lunch break. You're having a one-on-one conversation with someone. So think about that conversation. And then when I moved into TV, when you look at the lens on a camera, even if it might be a big broadcast camera, that lens is somebody's face. It could be your brother, your sister, your partner, one of your kids, your grandmother, whatever, and you're having a one-on-one conversation with that person. So I was very used to it. So for me, I was thinking, what's the big fuss about? But for other people, it was very different. If they haven't done that before, how are they suddenly supposed to be television presenters, which is basically what we're doing here, or radio hosts? Yeah. And so it's become, very normal for people like you and me now doing this, but it's not normal for everybody. So that's what we do. We teach the skills of how to come across on camera. But then I also say, so if you saw me in a restaurant tonight, you'd get the same Steve. If you come to INSEAD, see me in front of a group of MBA participants or exec participants or executives coming in on a company specific program, it's the same Steve. Different nuances, It's finding your spot, knowing who you are and celebrating that, and then just being yourself and having a structured business conversation, as opposed to, got a presentation, got some slides to go through, got a meeting, got a job interview. It's just have a conversation, but have only structure and purpose.
I think that's a great example of transferable skills. So being TV presenter, radio, and those skills of working remotely before the COVID thing happened, and now it's becoming so relevant. I'm sure, 20 years ago, you would never imagine the world that we live in today, right?
LinkedIn has gone really big on video now, hasn't it? As opposed to writing short posts or articles. And I look at the people that are, doing their videos on LinkedIn, and I'm not connected to all of them. And I'm just thinking, wow, this is just fantastic. It's just people walking along the street or sitting down somewhere on a bus, on a train, whatever, just talking to the camera. And actually, most people are doing it really, really well, which is interesting because those skills, for most of us who did that as a career, it took a long time to develop those skills. So now it's, there used to be a joke back in the day, like, oh, every American is born with a microphone in their hand and a camera in their face, which of course is completely untrue. It was a stereotype and remains a stereotype. But now it seems that, we are literally being born with a camera in our face.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's become normal, but we have to be careful that we don't fall into pitfalls. That's the main thing.
Yeah. However, looking across the whole spectrum, though, it is still a difficult skill for the vast majority of us. And I think, one thing that I would like to see, that communication skills are no longer just the focus area of executive leadership positions or MBAs, but it's actually broad-based and it's taught to everyone. From high school kids to undergraduates, and not as an elective, as a core subject.
Yes.
You have to hone and refine and really learn different forms of communications.
Yes.
Remote communications, in-person communications, written communications, non-verbal communication. We can say a lot just by standing here, not saying very much, but with a lot of animation.
Yes.
Very, very few people have access to good communications training.
Yeah.
And it's so good to see that you've now put your training materials on an online platform that can potentially scale across the globe to provide more people with access to these skills.
We have four key categories within Art of Comms methodology. So we have 6 pillars, which I could talk about later, but the 4 key areas is somebody's message clarity. Then the second one is the quality of their voice. The third one is the body language. And the fourth and final one is what we call the gift of you. Mm-hmm. And the gift of you is, your experience, your expertise, your knowledge, what you bring to the table that nobody else can. The you as an individual, what makes you special and why people will feel the sense that they can trust you, that they can connect with you, that there's some chemistry, or they're purposely looking for someone that's different than them to bring that diversity and different way of thinking. But that's all down to us as individuals. And that's the one thing we have to really protect and nurture. And it's the one thing that most people leave at home because, just because of culture. And that culture of, little children should be seen and not heard. Don't blow your own trumpet. Don't be big-headed. Don't be arrogant. You won't get your head through the door and all that sort of stuff. We grow up with that in most cultures. So it's not surprising by the time we get to, certainly university age, we've already started to shrink down. And I work with corporate clients, executives, C-suite, one-on-one as a coach for communication and leadership. And if I had $1 for every time that somebody has said, they grew up in a situation where they were told to keep their voice down at the dinner table, even Americans, before we go to that stereotype, and keep your voice down at the table, don't speak until it's your turn. If it's a large family and you're the younger one, you never get a chance. And I hear that time and time again, or they were, just disencouraged from speaking at school and at home. And then suddenly they're a leader. And that's when people tend to give me a call because they're saying, I've got this far in the business, but I'm not going to be able to get to the next level unless I up my game on my leadership communication abilities.
Yeah. So you mentioned trust there again, and that's a really important topic, and communications is core to that. But in the context of AI, and we spoke about this before, deepfakes, and it can be used in a good way and it can be used in a not so good way. How do you see the importance of really intentionally teaching communications as a way of fostering and helping people build more trust in the age of AI?
Yeah. So, number one, that really has to happen. And I had a conversation with somebody. I'll try and leave details out because it's quite an interesting one. So the person I was speaking to was given the task of recording material to help people develop in a certain skill, not communication skills. And the person said to me, I've been told that some people don't quite understand what I'm saying because of my accent when I speak English, because English is not my native tongue. And I said, how are you working with that then? Expecting the person to say, oh, it's great because I'm getting lots of coaching and support, but I'm still being encouraged to have the gift of me, to be proud of my culture, etc., and enunciate the words clearer, which is what we teach. So we can keep our accents and be proud of them, not be embarrassed by them for whatever reason, peer pressure, etc. And then the answer I got was quite shocking, because they said there's this great app that I discovered, and I can put a photo of me in or a short video, and it will change my accent to American English. And I said, well, why would you want to do that? And they said, well, and then everybody understands me. I said, yeah, but it's not you. It's not you. And they said, yeah, it was a video. And I said, yeah, but when they see you in the flesh, they're going to think, what happened to your American accent? So I think that I found that very troubling, to be honest. And I would, my hope is that those situations that people get the coaching and the training that will help them while still being true to the gift of themselves, So the accent thing is something that can get in the way. So I can understand the challenges and sometimes the negative criticism people can get if their accent gets in the way. But then let's help people with that, as opposed to recording fake videos with American accents or British accents, whichever it is, So yeah, that's the way I think about that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so essentially use AI as a tool to enhance, to use your term, the gift of you, your unique characteristics, your cultural background. Don't hide it or change it unnecessarily. Use it as a way to amplify those characteristics. And by doing that, you build trust.
Yes.
More trust.
Yes. And really focus on the enunciation of the words, which is different than pronunciations. If we're going to say the word water, I say it with a certain way coming from the south of England. Somebody else will say it differently in Scotland. So as long as we stretch the words and be mindful to the two syllables in the word of water, it doesn't really matter what accent we've got, as long as we're understood. We're talking here about speaking English, but it's the same for any language.
I think it's also so important for us to really retain those cultural roots, especially since these AI tools are so widely accessible and you can use it for free. You can record an image that you prefer. You can record a voice that you prefer. You can generate all sorts of things so easily. But as we are so remote often, a lot of work and study are both done remotely. I think that is just going to be so important to retain that, to use that as a means to connect. Otherwise, we'll all look and sound the same potentially, and that's going to be quite a dystopian world, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to think about that. Yeah, and you have to lead it. So when you're running something online, for example, and whether you've got a group of people or it's one-on-one, you have to be the conductor of yourself in terms of your voice and your animation and your energy, and that is congruent with the message, because of course we could be talking about something that's really tough and not particularly pleasant to have to deal with, and then the body language and the voice will change accordingly. But whatever, the person who's speaking has to drive that. So firstly, you have to conduct yourself like a musical conductor, and then you have to conduct the people that are listening to you, whether they're in the room with you or through the lens of a camera and the tech that we're using right now. You have to lead it and conduct it, because if you are unsure, or you are flat or sounding boring or not interested, or you have the wrong congruency in the voice, so it's something that's horrific and tough, but you're delivering it like it's a celebration, or it's something that's really fantastic for people, but you're reading it like it's a eulogy at a funeral. That's when it's wrong. And so at the end of the day, we are walking, talking musical instruments. So we have to understand that first of all. If you play a saxophone or a clarinet, when you exhale, you vibrate the reed in the mouthpiece of that instrument, and then your fingers cause the notes. When we speak, our breath vibrates our vocal cords, which sit behind the Adam's apple here in the larynx, and we're vibrating the vocal cords. And instead of using our fingers to create the notes, or not the microphone, instead of using our fingers to create the notes, we're using our teeth, tongue, our soft palate, our hard palate, our gums, the masseter muscles that we chew with, the TM joint here, and the muscles all around the larynx. So there's a whole lot going on, just like when we sing. So when we play a musical instrument, when we sing, therefore, why not when we speak? Because it's exactly the same process. And that's the thing that I enjoy really coaching people on, is that to respect everything about the amazing qualities of our biology, our anatomy, that everything about us is so unique and special. And to realize that hopefully we all get the opportunity to have a voice, because not everybody does, and that we use our voice wisely and we use it for positive things in the world.
Yeah, I love that visual. We're walking musical instruments, and as you're saying, all that, actually, we forget sometimes that this voice that we have is so special, and there's so much going on, and there's so many aspects to it. And I think that's one of the skills that I think is so important for us people to really understand and to really hone it.
Yes. Yes.
And done in such a way that it's widely accessible, easily understood. Whether you're from 15 to 50, it's something that people don't take for granted and learn to perfect and constantly practice.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of
There's some myths as well with communication skills. People sometimes think, oh, I'm not in that kind of job. I'm not in marketing or sales, or I'm not, the manager. I do deep thinking work and technical work, or, I don't need communication skills. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I would say that's one to definitely watch. And all the courses I've run in companies, depending on how many of us coaches we have, but let's just say it's 1 coach to 7, roughly. Beginning of the day, you might have the person from marketing, the person from sales, the person from the IT department, the person from the engineering department, etc. And of course, stereotypically and statistically, the marketing and the salespeople, they've been recruited because they have a certain essence and a certain character and a skill. So of course, if you're going to stereotype and statisticize it, you if there is such a word, you're going to see those guys certainly in the morning of the course, the first day, seeming to be better. And then you'll get the other guys that I was just talking about, regardless of gender. And they'll say, oh my gosh, I hate speaking. I'm down there in the basement. I'm a bit of a geek. I don't need to speak. And then actually, because of the atmosphere that we create, you normally find that by the end of the 2 days, if it's a 2-day course that we're doing, the person who said they hate it and they're a bit of a geek and they're down in the dungeon will be the one who's done the best, because they've really, really gotten the appetite for it. And we just treat it as some fun as well and create that sort of safe environment. And the people that kind of already know that they're okay, they don't maybe put quite so much effort in. Well, it's not always the case, obviously, but if I could put $1 down for those guys that come out from what they regard as the bottom league and they come out at the top, just through changing the mindset and getting them to enjoy it. That's the thing, And I remember one specific example. And it was at Bath University on the MBA program there, Bath in the UK. And we had a female participant from Korea, and we were filming them as we do for the course. And then she was, crying, and she looked up and she's looking at herself on the big screen, and she goes, "Is that me?" And I was like, "Of course it's you." And she goes, "That's me?" And I went, "Yeah." She goes, "I'm actually quite good, aren't I?" It was a complete, because she had this fear. And then she actually saw herself, which she'd never do out of choice. And maybe now she would, but yeah. So if you think now as a 28-year-old, that would be, people would be more used to doing that, but that was maybe 20 years ago. And she was petrified. But then when she saw it, hey, that's okay. I'm all right now. So that's the joy of when that happens. And it happens a lot. Still, actually,
That's a fantastic story. And I think that just is another reason why it's important to get people to undertake some of this training and learning. And wow, okay, I actually am pretty good. Reinforces or actually changes the perception, changes the preconceived notion of how she saw herself.
And that's a really interesting one. Whether it's compulsory or not, I think that's always going to be the $60 million question. And people always say to the students after the course, say to me, "This should be part of the core course." And I said, "But it's not going to happen because there's not the time. There's just not the time." But we give them the app now, so we say, there's no reason why you can't. You get the app for life now, so and it will keep evolving. So keep your groups going, keep practicing. Don't just rest on your laurels, or else you'll be back to where you were on day one, be where you are in 1 year's time if you don't keep evolving.
So you mentioned it's not the time a couple of times, but this is all about maybe rethinking the curriculum, rethinking what's important and prioritizing what people learn and teach. You're doing an accounting course, or you have to do finance, you have to do whatever. But with technology like ChatGPT, why not spend the time reprioritizing, maybe shift as electives what used to be core?
That would be an interesting one. If things may evolve like that.
So maybe wrapping up now, and I do want to ask a question, since this is an education podcast, about your teacher. So you've been teaching for a long time, but who's a teacher that you've had in your life? And that teacher could be a mentor, a coach, or a previous manager, but someone who's made the most impact in your career, and why?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one. And the one person There's two people, and it may be in different ways than you should maybe think or maybe would think, because it's not necessarily about teaching me. It's about shining a light on a path. So, for example, it was the then sales director of Orange, the mobile phone company in the UK, who brought me on to work with him and his team. And it was him who said, go teach the MBA students. If he hadn't have said that to me, I wouldn't have in a million years, I don't think, ever thought, oh, that's an interesting thing. I must go and teach MBA students. It just wouldn't have entered my domain because I was broadcasting and doing voiceovers and hosting conferences. To actually go out and teach and coach other people, that was just not on my radar. And it's like, you could be a fantastic football player or a fantastic tennis player. It doesn't mean you're going to make a good coach. You may or you may not, right? So it's a different skill set. But if he hadn't have said that to me, then I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And the other one, and again, it's not about teaching me, it's about shining the light. So we have a professor at INSEAD, Antonio Fatas. Hello, Antonio, if you ever listen to this webinar, this podcast. So Antonio was the dean of the MBA at the time when I'd only been at INSEAD for 1 year. And I'm part-time. I'm called an adjunct professor because I'm part-time, because I have my own business to run as well. And my family and I had decided to move from London to Perth in Western Australia, which is where I am now. And so I went basically to give my notice into INSEAD or at least to tell him. And Antonio said, oh, I've never been to Australia before. Have you been? I said, yeah, lots of times. That's why we're going. And he said, oh, tell me about it. And we were chatting for about 20 minutes. And then he suddenly goes, Steve, I'm sorry. I've got to go. I've got a meeting. And I said, so what are we going to do? He said, what do you mean, what are we going to do? I said, I just told you I'm going to Australia. He said, and? I said, well, it's a long way away. And, I'm kind of saying I'm going, and he said, well, don't be ridiculous. He said, it's just a mindset. He said, when you get from your house in Oxted in Surrey and you go up to Heathrow Airport, that's probably sometimes a 2-hour journey. Then you got all the faffing around, and then you got a 45-minute flight from London to Paris. But then you got all the faffing around with the baggage and the passport control, which is always very slow in France, terrible. And then you got the hour and a half, ride to Fontainebleau. That's like 7.5 hours. And then when you've done in Fontainebleau, you go down to Singapore, and then you come back to London. That's what you do for us, right? So he said, instead, you'll be starting in Perth. So you just be starting down the bottom rather than at the top. And he said, it'll probably take you 20 minutes to get to the airport. True. It'll be so efficient. You'll be through in no time. It's 4 hours, 45 minutes in the air. So it's 4 hours longer. But when you get to Singapore, your bags will be through very quick. The passport control is very efficient, and you'll be on campus within 20 minutes. That's about 6 hours and 15 minutes. So you'll save yourself an hour and 15 minutes. Yeah. So just carry on. And then when you're done you can start in Singapore, and then you can come up to Fontainebleau, and then you can go see your family in London when you're finished with us. So I was like, wow, okay. And that's what's been going on all these years. And it's just amazing, amazing. So again, if it wasn't for the foresight of the sales director to say, go teach the MBAs, if it wasn't for my colleague Antonio Fatas saying, so what, Australia, and you make it happen. And obviously you still got to do a good job, and you still got to be relevant, otherwise it wouldn't be happening. And that's why that passion is so strong in me. So I those are the two people I'd like to thank the most. And I don't remember the name of the sales director from Orange because it was so long ago. But
that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. And what a way to we started with mindset and assumptions affecting our mindset, and then we finished with one of your teachers with the importance of mindset as well, looking at things differently. So last segment of the show is a bit of fun, plugs. So this is an opportunity for you to plug a company, a person, organization, a purpose that you're passionate about. Over to you to plug something.
Sure. Well, I'm definitely going to plug Art of Comms, which, as you mentioned at the beginning, is the app that I've been so busy working on with a team, of course, over the last now 5 years. And we have been able to evolve the Art of Comms app at INSEAD with everybody using it and within the courses that I teach and giving feedback. So the way it works is you record yourself and then you share it with a group of people, and then your colleagues give you peer feedback using sliders to give you points up to 5 for your quality of message, quality of voice, body language, and the gift of you. And then also the AI coach gives feedback within 30 seconds on message clarity. And so within a very short period of time, you've got your peers, plus us as coaches, plus the AI coach giving you feedback on your communication and your message and how you delivered it. And there's also 2 hours of e-learning video content in there. It's an app. It's on the App Store and it's on Google Play. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Steve. So for me, if you like this show, please go on your streaming platform where you got this from and give me 5 stars or something. If you have any questions, please drop me a line. But that is another episode of Relearning Work, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, David.